Hey folks, welcome in. This is Chris with Alpenglow Digital. In today's video, we're going to take a look at creating a Teams approval workflow. This is going to be very similar to the email approval workflow we created a little bit ago, where you have some requests in SharePoint. You want to send them to approver. In that video, of course, they got an email where they could approve something. In this case, we are going to create these nice little adaptive cards within Teams. Someone can then review it, provide some notes, and then either approve or reject it. So that is going to be triggered from SharePoint. We're then going to create a Power Automate flow. It's going to post the adaptive card to Teams in the way you saw it. It's going to use this for the message body, which is a little intimidating, but we're going to get nice and familiar with the adaptive card designer for Microsoft. And then once folks actually have a chance to decision the request in Teams, we're then going to capture that information, come back to SharePoint and update the status, the approver, and the approval notes column to indicate that something has either been approved or denied. So without further ado, let's go. Hey folks, welcome into Power Automate. Before we build out our automated cloud flow, I want to touch on a few pieces of this project that are completed already that we won't cover in this video. We have a SharePoint list set up here. The way we want it to work is that folks can request event planning assistance here through our list. And we have a column down here called approval requested, just a little yes or no column. When this is set to yes and then saved, we want that to be the update that then triggers our flow. It's going to then post a card to a Teams channel that we already have created. I'm using Teams Online, but the Teams desktop app works great too. And the channel that we're going to eventually post to is our approvers channel. And so our cards will appear here. The approvers in our channel can then either kind of approve or decline the requests here, and then that information is captured back in SharePoint. So the SharePoint list and the Teams channel are two pieces that we won't cover here. And now we are just going to focus on creating our cloud flow. Back here in Power Automate, we are going to click on Automated Cloud Flow. And this is going to be, we'll call it Teams Approval. And you can choose the trigger here if you'd like. And in our case, it is going to be when an item is created or modified. I wish they had just a when an item is modified trigger here in SharePoint. But for the moment, I think this is the only way you can look at either create or modified stuff in SharePoint. So let's click Create. This will take a second, and it will have our new flow set up. I've had better luck with the old designer, so I'm going to turn the new designer off. I like the simplicity of the old designer. I am trying to get better about using the new designer, but either way, you should have the same capabilities regardless of which designer you're using. The first thing it's going to ask us is, hey, what SharePoint list do we need to worry about watching to see when items are created or modified? And so go find the SharePoint site where your list is housed, and then the list that you care about. The next step I'm going to add is kind of a fail-safe. So what I want to do is I want to check on the changes that were made to the item that hit this trigger. And the reason I want to do that is I want to make sure that this does not get ran over and over and over again. So what I'm going to do is check that the approval requested column actually changes. And those are the changes that are captured here in our SharePoint item that's modified. If there are other things that change in the SharePoint list item, like somebody adds notes or changes like the assignee, I don't want that to run this flow again. So this is going to allow us to get the specific changes and better understand whether we care about them or not. So I'm going to search for get changes for an item in SharePoint. This one right here, get changes for an item or file. And again, we're going to go pick the same site address and list that we have up here in the first step. And mine is the event planning requests. The ID for the item we care about is going to probably be the only one that pops up. This is the ID captured here in the trigger. And then this is our window that we're going to capture results for. So what is nice is if you type in trigger, what this does is trigger window start token is basically going to start capturing changes when an item is first pulled up and edited. And then you're going to capture changes all the way until, you type trigger again, your window end token. So basically what this says is, hey, pay attention to every change made when I first pull up the SharePoint list item. I'm clicking edit. I'm maybe changing a few values around. And then when I close it or save it, then we stop capturing changes. And so this is a way to just see everything that has changed in that one particular instance where somebody was editing your SharePoint list item. And the reason we care about that is we want to check and see if the column that is our approval requested, is that the column that actually changed, and we'll capture that information here in this step. So let's save this, and then we're going to add a little condition. So next up, we are going to add a condition here, and we're going to check to see if the approval requested, which again, this is the column that we care about, which is here in our SharePoint list, approval requested. This is our yes, no column. That's the column we want to see. Did it change, and did it change to yes? If both those things are true, then we want our flow to proceed and trigger with our kind of Teams card creation. So here in the condition, we have access to a bunch of stuff. So if we start typing has, this is all the information that was captured here in this step, which was looking at all the changes made. So has the ID column changed? Has the event title column changed? The status, etc. And so what we care about is approval requested. So has the column changed? Approval requested. We want that to be true. This is either true or false, a Boolean value. So if somebody has changed that column, we want that to be the case, and this is going to be an and statement. We want the final value for this column to be yes. If it's no, then approval is not requested. We're going to go down this no tree, and we're not going to post anything into Teams. If it has been changed and the final result is yes, then we want to go down this yes column, and we will eventually send a card to Teams. So what I'm going to look for in here is approval requested, and I'm going to look for the value of it, which again is pulled from your trigger step. And if the final value is equal to yes, then that'll send us down this way where we'll post to Teams. If both of these things are not true, then we go down the no tree. So let's save that and then work on our yes tree. All right, so if we go down the no tree, nothing happens because we don't want to send anything to Teams. We don't want to do anything. It's just going to kind of dead end here. On the yes side, we want to then post our adaptive card to Teams. So if you come in here and add a step and search for a post adaptive, it should be this first item here, post adaptive card, and wait for a response. And it's going to ask you, how do you want to post this? Who do you want to post it as? If you are familiar with virtual agents, I haven't done a lot of work with them. You can choose that. I'm just going to have it be a Flowbot. It'll literally just say Flowbot as the author when it posts to the channel. You can then pick where you want it to post in Teams. You can post it in a chat, like a specific chat with a Flowbot, where it might ping somebody as like a separate entity as a Flowbot, or a group chat, or in my case, a channel. And when you select channel, it's going to give you a few more options down here. Don't worry about message. We're going to get to that in a second. That's kind of the body of your card. And we'll come touch on update message here in a second too. But for right now, we chose channel, and so it wants to know what team and what channel are we going to post this to. So I'm going to search for my teams. I have a Power Platform testing crowd, and I'm going to search for the channel that I care about, which is approvers. Again, if I go back to my teams channel over here, this is the Power Platforms testing crowd, which is the team, and then the specific channel I care about is here called approvers. So we have that set up. Now we're going to delve into kind of the nitty-gritty of adaptive cards, which is the body of your message. Message is a little bit misleading because this is not simply the copy that appears in your card, but this is the entire code that renders your card. So it's going to end up being a big JSON object, and it's kind of referred to as a payload, and it's going to be very complex. You're not going to want to write it from scratch. And so Microsoft's aware of this. And so what they've done is created this website called adaptivecards.microsoft.com. And it's basically a huge library, not only a sandbox, but a huge library for documentation for how to create these cards and the different widgets and components that you can put in them. So I will put this link in the description for the show. We're going to keep it nice and simple, but if you wanted to, there are awesome design tips about, like, hey, here's an example of a nice adaptive card. It has embedded video and a star rating and things like that. It goes over kind of the common card layouts that you might want to use. And then it just gives you a bunch of different elements that you can reference, actions like buttons and badges and carousels. You can really make these really quite complex, almost like kind of mini websites inside Teams or Outlook or elsewhere. But we're going to keep things nice and simple. And so what I want to do is back up here under welcome. If you go to create, it will take you to a card designer. Now this looks a little bit intimidating. The one thing to point out is that, again, we're going to keep this nice and simple. It's going to have a little bit of information, and it's going to have like an approve, deny button, and that's going to be about it. So what we will eventually copy from here and paste back into Teams is going to be this payload right here. So again, one just big object that says, hey, this is of type adaptive card. Here's the schema we want to use, the version we want to use. And as we add things like images or text or buttons, you will see this payload expand to specify all of the elements that we've added to our card. Then we're going to copy that right back into Power Automate, and it'll do all the magic for us behind the scenes. So I know it's a little bit intimidating, but let's dive into how to use this editor to build us a card. So I say that we start with something kind of nice and simple. Let's get the card built. Let's add it to Power Automate. Let's post it to Teams. Make sure at least that part of it works. Then let's go update the card with the information we care about. See how we can get the response back when somebody either approves or denies it in Teams back into Power Automate. And then we go back and actually update the SharePoint list item based on the results of kind of the decision made within Teams in the card. So let's just build something nice and simple in this card. So there are a ton of elements here. Right at the top, you have kind of the theme that you can use. This is just the theme for the editor. I like dark theme. Let's do that. You can also specify the width that you'd like your card to be. And this, I actually don't know if this will change the width of the card, or it's just a way to see how the card will look on different screen sizes, or in this case, like the size of the actual like Teams channel that it has access to. The cards are largely responsive, and so they will look pretty good regardless of screen size. Let's just do standard for now. Copy card payload, of course, is just going to copy all this text here. So we will do that when we're done, and then you can preview it. And of course, this is what the actual card looks like. Can't see anything now. So we'll preview in a second. On the left here are all of the elements that you can drag and drop into your card. So these top ones are anything from images to videos to tables. If you want folks to be able to actually input something, maybe they want to input notes, then you can drop one of these input elements in there. And then I haven't used these much, but there are charts if you had a bunch of data and you wanted to help visualize things inside the card. So what I like to do is do something really simple. I want to have like a banner image on the top. I want to have a header. I want to have some copy. And then I want to have like a few decisions, either approve or decline. So let's start with just an image. So from the left here, I'm going to grab image and I'm just going to drag it over. And so here is our card structure. This will look kind of like Power Apps, where you have kind of our container, if you will, or screen, which is the card, and then all the elements within it. In this case, we just have an image, and you can do a lot of different things kind of dynamically. You can decide when to show it. Again, when we copy this over, all this is going to be kind of statically typed. But when we copy it into Power Automate, we will have a way to kind of make it dynamic. So if we wanted to say request details for request ID, we will have a way to feed in the ID from our Power Automate flow into the text here. But for now, things are going to kind of be static here in this preview. Let's click on image. I have a banner image just saved that I was using elsewhere. Not the prettiest thing in the world, but I'm just going to have this at top. And then I don't mind so much the spacing. You could change the style. You know, if this was a person, it tries to kind of make it rounded, like you have like you're indicating a person. Maybe you'd use that in like Power Automate or you see within emails. You can specify the height and the width statically if you want to. Otherwise, it's just going to do its best to fill up the space. Here are a few other elements: stretch, small, medium. I'm not going to mess with those, but you can see when I change this, it adds some sizing elements here in our payload. So I'm going to change this back to auto. Again, not going to worry so much about the height. The image is nice and simple. We can change things around once it's there. The next thing I want to do is add like a header. So I'm just going to add a text block. I'm going to drag it up here and I'm going to put it right below the image. And again, when I have it selected here, if I go over to the right, you'll see a bunch of properties for it. The text is actually what you'll see. And I want to say placeholder header. Okay, you can see it over here. And let's change, the spacing is, I think, kind of like padding on top. So if I click extra large, you can see it made a bigger space here. If I were to do small, there's a little bit less space. So let's do large, give it some space. And I want the font size to be extra large, and I want to change the font to bolder. So this is kind of like editing things in Power Apps where you have a lot of the same options. It's a little bit more limited, but things like colors and sizing and things like that you have access to. Okay, so we've got an image, we've got a header. Let's add another like text block for the body copy. So just like we did for the header, we're going to come back over here, grab a text block, put it underneath. And I have some lorem ipsum over here on another screen that I'm going to grab just as placeholder copy. So again, I have the text block selected. I'm going to come over here and just paste that in there. So again, this will eventually be like, hey, we received this new request. We'd appreciate it if you could review it, something like that. And now what I want to add are a couple buttons here at the bottom that are going to be our actions. And so the action is going to be approve or deny, and we'll start there. So to add those, we are going to add a action set. Here it is, the very top. So an action set is going to be it's going to be at least one action, but it will just be kind of a container, and then you get to specify each of the actions inside it. So you can see when I added this here, it then gave me the pop-up before add an action. In our case, these are going to be kind of submit, because what this is going to do is when this is selected, it's going to go back to Power Automate and said, hey, somebody submitted a decision, here it is, and that will be helpful. So right now, action submit, again, you can see it over here, it kind of created a parent-child relationship with the set and the individual buttons. Title, instead of action submit, I'm going to say approve. I'll say approved. And then if I go over here and click the action set again, add another action, it is also still a submit, except that it's going to be, let's say rejected. So something's either going to be approved or rejected. They look the same aesthetically right now. So I'm going to click the approved, come over here to style and change this to positive. It becomes blue. The rejected button, I'm going to change the style to destructive, and that'll be kind of red. So folks will get this card. They will eventually be able to see the actual request in question, approve or reject it. But right now, this is a good, really simple card to use to test with in Power Automate. So let's go test that now. At the top here, I'm going to click copy card payload, and then I'm going to come back up here and find my flow. And here in the message body, I'm going to paste all of this. So this is the reason you probably don't want to write these from scratch. You can see this is really, really ugly, but it is the format that Power Automate needs to use when it posts to teams for teams to understand, hey, this is an adaptive card and here's the structure it should align to. So we've got that. Let's save this and just take a look at what this looks like in Teams. I'm back here in the landing page for my flow. I'm going to come up here to SharePoint. I'm going to choose this request, Gary's 30th birthday bash. I'm going to edit it. And again, I'm going to change the field that triggers the flow, which is approval requested. So if I save that, this has been changed to yes. This will eventually trigger this flow. And so I'm going to pause the video because sometimes it takes a little bit for the flow to run. And once it starts running, we'll come take a look at it. We have our flow running now, so you can see it here, and it's stuck in this running status because we haven't gone into Teams and decisioned it. So if you remember, this step right here, again, I'm going to turn off new view, is called post adaptive card and wait for a response. So what it's doing right now is just waiting. And I can't remember how long it waits for. I think sometimes days if you want it to. It just will not finalize the flow until it has a decision from the card, and then it'll move on to the next step. And of course, in this case, it is the final step. So this is going to stay running. Let's take a look at Teams. So here in my approvers chat, I have our card. So it has the image, our header text, our body text, and then our two options. So that looks great. Now let's click on one of these and see what happens. So I decided that I'm going to approve this. It then says, hey, this person use Power Automate, send this notification, and you have approved. Thanks for your response. And so if you come back over here to Power Automate, again, I don't know why it just really is going to push the new designer on me today. But let me try to turn off this designer again. You can see it ran successfully. So it got all the way through. The condition was met because I changed the column to yes. We posted the adaptive card, and you get a bunch of information about like who approved it, what my name was, my email address. And then you also get the submit action ID of approved. And so this will be very helpful when you go to update our SharePoint item. So let's update this card to be a little bit more practical. So instead of placeholder header, you can also click in here and change it, which is nice instead of coming over here. Placeholder header, let's say approval requested. And what I'd eventually like to do is have something like ID so-and-so and then have the SharePoint ID in here. But for the moment, let's just do approval requested. And then I have a little bit of copy over here that I'm going to use instead of this text block. And now what we need to do is link to the actual submission that we care about. And so I'm going to add a button here that is going to link off to that. And the reason that I'm going to add a button, actually, I think it might be part of the action set. Yeah, let's do that. Let's add another action set. So this action set, if I go in here, it's going to be an open URL type. So it's kind of going to be a button. This is just the way to go about it. And this is going to say review request. And so I can also add an icon if I wanted to. There are a bunch of them. So let's see if there's like an open icon of some sorts. Maybe like this one. Cool. Okay. So we have review request. And then because it is an open URL, we do need to give it an actual URL. So for now, I'm just going to give it the URL to my list. And then we're going to work on making it adaptive or, dynamic. The actual SharePoint list item dynamic in a second. But right now, we're just going to have it go to our SharePoint list. And then I want maybe another text block down here that says, please make your decision below. And that's just going to ask them to either approve or reject it. And then let's make that a little bit bigger. So if I come over here to the specific text block, I want it to be size medium. That's by default large. We'll make this bold too. If you add a separator right here, it's actually going to add a separator above. You can see kind of a horizontal line, like if you were using HTML, just goes across the whole card. Sometimes that's nice to just visually break it up. I am going to change the spacing a tad up here, padding. I'm going to give it just a little bit more room. Maybe for these, I'll change the spacing a little bit as well. So now we have these. Okay, so now we have a legitimate title, a little bit of context. This will open to eventually to the specific SharePoint list item, and then a header here for our options. So one more thing that I want to do is I want to give folks an opportunity to add a little bit of context for their decision. So not only approve or reject, but I want them to be able to actually add some sort of notes that I'm again going to capture in SharePoint eventually. So maybe I want to add some text. So I'm going to choose input text. Maybe I'll put that above here. And this will be, instead of label, it's going to be, let's just call it notes. So again, somebody will come here, they'll review it, give some notes like, hey, this looks good. I'm worried about X, Y, and Z. This is approved. So that's what I'd like this to do. So I think we have all this hooked up pretty well. One thing that I do want to do is change this link to go to the specific SharePoint list item that triggered our flow up here. So whatever the idea of this is, I want to be able to change this link so that it goes to that ID. So let's take a look at how to do that really quick. So I think we've done kind of all we want to do here in the designer. I might come back to this in a second, but I think we have a pretty good setup. And kind of the rest of the work and kind of the unique customization we want to do is going to be in Power Automate. So I'm going to copy the card payload again, which is all this JSON. And I'm going to come back over to Power Automate. Let's go edit our flow. I'm going to replace everything that is currently in here in our message section with all of that new information. And if you see here, this is one of our action sets, which is our open URL. So it right now goes to the list. And what we want it to do is go to the specific item that triggered this flow. And so the easiest way to do that, I found, is if we come up here to SharePoint, I'm just going to use this as an example. If you come over here and go to, sorry, I actually don't need to open the specific item. If you just have the list open, come over here to the details pane, and it will show you whichever item you have selected. Way at the bottom, there is a path here. So if you copy the direct link to the path, let's just put it in our browser and see what it looks like. It is going to be to our SharePoint site, the specific SharePoint site, and our specific list. And then it's going to give you the ID right here. So 32 is the ID of that one. So what we can do is we can provide this statically, this whole portion of the URL. And then at the right at the end, we can add on our ID. So let's just copy this part, everything except for the ID. We come back into Power Automate. We're going to change this out to, again, everything except for the ID, and we're going to provide the ID value dynamically. So I want the ID of this item when an item was created or modified, which is our trigger. And so now when we click our review request button, it should take us to the specific item that we care about. So we will test that in a second. The nice thing is that you can also add that anywhere you want. So where is our original text block? So here's one of our header text block, approval requested. Then you could say for ID colon that same ID. And again, this will just help things not get so lost. You won't see just approval requested over and over again. You'll see approval requested for the specific IDs. So that looks pretty good. Let's take a look. Oh, this is the last one that I'll change before we test it again. The update message is what you see after you've decisioned it. So I want to say thanks for your response to, again, I'm going to add the ID here. So you just don't see the same message over and over again. Okay, cool. So let's save and test. Back here in SharePoint, I am going to select Evan's 12th birthday. I am going to change this to approval requested yes. Save it. And then let's wait here in Teams to see if our card pops up. So our card did not pop up, but it actually failed. Our flow failed. So here in that failed flow, this is something that I've encountered a lot when building these originally. And it's a very simple thing that I forgot, but I think it's a good learning opportunity. So if we open it up, you might have some sort of failed message like this, huge long text string. What I want to pay close attention to is it says the tracking ID is 0. The required property of ID was not found on input.text. So if you recall, one of the elements in our card is this little input field where folks can add notes. And if you do not provide it over here on the right, an explicit ID, then Power Automate doesn't know how to track the data that was inputted there. And so it's going to error on you. I wish that this was required kind of in the UI. So I knew that if I created an input type, there's a bunch of them down here, that I needed an ID, but I just forgot. So let's call this one approval notes. And so if you don't want to recopy all of your card payload, what you can see is that right here in our input.text block, it just added this line right here, ID colon approval note. So if we go back to Power Automate, we can just go in here, we can edit our flow and just add that one line. We don't have to copy it back over and then add in here our special ID. So all the way down, I'm going to look for this one, input.text. And then down here, I'm going to add ID approval notes. So let's test this and see if that finally runs for us. Alrighty, so we've got our new card here in Teams. We've got our header with the ID pulled in dynamically. We have our view request button and our input here, and then our original approved or rejected buttons. I do want to make one call out. I did screw up the convention for this string. I swear this worked on a different site I was working on, but this URL structure doesn't seem to work. If you come over here, here's the desired one. So apparently it really does want you to indicate which display form you're going to do it and then add the ID like this. So if I copy this, I'll go back into Power Automate and we'll just edit this so that for future reference we have it correct. And then we'll run the card and see if we can get that to show up correctly. And then we will actually fill in the card and see what sort of response comes back. So real quick, I'm going to come back in here, replace all that, ID equals, and then ID dynamically from SharePoint. And so let's just double check that this works. All right, we reran that, same ID. And now when you click review request, this pops out and you're taken to Evan's 12th birthday, which is ID 30, which is correct. So we've got that looking nice. And so now we kind of have like a pretty legitimate card. So if I'm reviewing this, I can pop out the request, view all the details that I care about, and then I can make a decision. So let's just pretend to do that. So this looks good, but please watch out for XYZ. Okay, so say I like it, but I have a couple notes. I'm going to approve it. Let's take a look at what not only the notes and the decision look like in Power Automate. Because what we're going to do is we're going to take that data and then use that to update the SharePoint list item to let the rest of the team know this has been decisioned. Here are some notes from the approver. Go ahead and carry on. So here in Power Automate, this was our last run right here that we had put in that text for. So if we open it up, we can come in here. We can see the adaptive card and all of the response values. So once again, you can see who reviewed it. That was me, of course. Display name, approved, and here is that variable that we called, that ID variable, called approval notes. Looks good to me. Please watch out for X, Y, and Z. So we're almost done. So we have the process set up to post the card. And now what we need to do is go in here to edit, and we need to update the SharePoint list item based on the response from the person that filled out that card. So let's do that. All right, after we get a response from our Teams card, we want to go in and update the item. This is going to be the same item that triggered our flow initially, so we can click Update Item here in SharePoint. Go specify, again, the SharePoint site. And, oops, this is actually the wrong site, Event Planning Assistance, and the list that we care about. And then the ID for the item we care about is going to be the same one that triggered it, which is right here. And now you can augment any of the SharePoint columns that you would like. So one of the ones I do want to change, for example, is the status of the overall ticket. If I've approved it in Teams, I want this to be approved. If I've rejected it in Teams, I will call it denied. Again, these are values that you specify in your SharePoint list. The other thing I want to capture is right here, approval claims. So I have a people picker column in my SharePoint list, and I can actually get the email address of the approver and put that in this column. So we always track who's actually approved requests. And then where we can input text into Teams in that little section, we can add that text into approval notes in SharePoint. So we always have a track record of who approved what and what they had to say and kind of what their decision was. So let's go through each of these and add those values. Let's start with the approver claims, which is going to be the email of the approver, and the approval notes. And then we'll get into the little if condition here to specify the status value, which again will depend whether something was approved or rejected. So here in claims, what would be nice, I'm going to go here and click enter custom value. It would be very nice if we had dynamic content from our Teams card step, but you really don't. I tried this on the new designer. I had one more option, but it wasn't really helpful. So what we need to do is go into, I have our previous flow up here. Here's the information we get back. We need to go into the body of this step, and we need to access responder and then the email. So we're going to unfortunately have to hand type it, which is not the end of the world, but I hope as these cards get more use that the Power Automate team finds a way to kind of better integrate them into options here. But that's okay. We're going to hand type it using an expression. So this is going to be the outputs, and it's going to be outputs from, and then we need to mention the step that we care about here in Power Automate. And unfortunately, I think you need to do underscore for spaces, adaptive card, and wait for a response. You could go and rename this step, which honestly probably would have been the smart thing to do, and so wouldn't have to type all of this. But we have this step here, and then next we want to drill into that. So that's the step we're referring to, and the question mark is kind of used to drill into something, and then you can drill into a specific property. So square brackets and then single quotes. As we saw from the last flow that we were referencing, we need to drill into the body first, into the responder second, and then the field we care about is email. So back in here within our single quotes, we are going to drill into the body, the responder, and then the email. Okay, so hopefully this doesn't error on us. Okay, it liked that well enough. And then for the approval notes, we're going to do something very similar. So I'm actually going to come up here, copy this, and I'm going to enter it in here. Again, we don't have any help, which is just really such a bummer. I'm going to enter it here, and then again, it won't be the email again. Let's go take a look at what the approval notes looks like here in the data. As we can see here, so again, it's in the body. It is in the data object, and then approval notes. So what all we should need here is body data. And we should probably copy the sentence case exactly, approval notes. And in theory, this should give us exactly what we need. So we've got those two functioning. Again, we'll test them in a second. Let's take a look at how to render the right status value based on whether something was approved or rejected here in our Teams card. Okay, so our status is going to be determined by the decision in Teams, and so we're going to write an equal statement that says, hey, if the person clicked the approved button, then the status is changed to approved. Again, here's our options here. Approved. If it was rejected, I think is what we had in Teams, then we're going to set the status to denied. And so what we're going to do here is just enter a custom value. Again, would love if we had a little bit more help here, but we're going to write it from scratch. So this is going to be an if statement. And the first thing we're going to do is compare two things. So equals, we're going to check if they are the same. So this is going to be the output from, again, this step. And what we care about, if we come back up here, is this value right here. Submit action ID and whatever value it says here. So it's either going to be approved or rejected. And so what we basically can say is if this is approved, then the status can be approved. Else, it must be rejected. So we don't have to write the rejected part. That can just be the kind of the false condition here. So we're going to write this again. So the outputs, again, this is kind of a bummer. We have to write the post adaptive card and wait for a response. So we've got that. We're going to drill into that. Again, what we care about is the body and then the submit action ID. So again, be very careful how this is typed. This should match exactly what we have right here. So I'm actually just going to copy it, paste it in there just to make sure that I have the exact right property we are comparing. So if that value equals approved, then this whole thing, the status for this actual, the status value here can be changed to approved. If those do not equal one another, then it must be rejected, and therefore we can change the status here to denied. So again, let me copy this over. I'll post it here in Notepad, and we'll just break it down real quick. So again, we're saying if the output from this step, our response from Teams, is equal to approved, meaning they click the approved button, then this is true, and therefore our status column is updated to approved. If this is not true, then our false condition kicks in and our status value is updated to denied. So unfortunately that went away, but I have it saved on Notepad. So let me come back in here, status value, copy that in here, press OK. And now let's save and test. One of the things that I do want to call out, when you do save this flow, you will see, now that we've added this update step, you will see this warning from Power Automate that says that you've created an infinite trigger loop. And that makes sense because what we're doing is, hey, we're watching for when an item is created or modified. And then we're going down here and then we're modifying an item, which then triggers this. Oh, it's like, oh, hey, something was modified again. Go back through here, update something. Oh, hey, something was modified. And so you can't get stuck in this infinite loop. Power Automate will cut it off after a little bit. You're not going to go thousands of reps. But one of the things that we're going to do right here at the very end of the video after we test this is add a trigger condition so that this doesn't fire all the time. But for right now, let's go test in SharePoint. So for this example, let's use a new item. We'll take this one, Sam's 45th birthday party. We're going to change this to maybe the status like makes sense. Like, hey, we're awaiting a decision. I'm going to request approval and then click save. And so then let's go back over here to our flow and double check that it runs. All right, we can see that it's running here. I'm not sure what fired this one, but nevertheless, this is the one. It's waiting, so we have a card in Teams. Sure enough, this is great. Here's our item. If we open it up, this will open up Sam's 45th birthday party. I can review things. And then back in Teams, I can say, this looks great. Please proceed. And then I can click approved. So what this should do is it should close the loop in Power Automate because now we have our data and our decision made. So if I go back over here, here is the flow that was running that we cared about. This has succeeded. That's done. And if I come back over here into SharePoint and click refresh, we should now see that this was approved. It was approved by me. And here are my approval notes. This looks great. There's one last thing that I want to do. I had kind of mentioned it before. I don't want this flow to run all the time because I'm going to be in there changing items. Maybe I'm going to be adding some notes. I'm going to change the assignee. I'm going to change things, and I don't need this to run always. And so what I'm going to do is, in addition to this check that I have here, condition check, this is probably sufficient. But one thing I do like to do is kind of restrict when this flow runs. So instead of running every time an item is created or modified, if you come up here to settings, you can add trigger conditions. And so these must be true before the flow even starts running. One of the bummers is that you can't check, to my knowledge, here whether values have changed. So kind of here where we capture, has the column value changed? I haven't been able to figure out a way to do that in the trigger condition. So you can't quite move all of this logic up here. If you did, then you wouldn't need this block because in order for the flow to run at all, both of these conditions would need to be met. But I haven't figured that out yet. So the one I have figured out, I'm going to copy this over from kind of a completed flow I have. The formatting is a little bit different, but essentially what you're doing is checking the trigger output. So this is the approval requested value. So this needs to equal yes before this flow even fires at all. So it's going to do a really quick check to say, hey, is the approval requested column here even set to yes? If so, then we'll run. And of course, it'll get down here and it might fail if that column hadn't changed. But at least it restricts your flow from running too many times. And it'll only run if a change has been made and the approval requested value is set to yes. Again, it might still hit the no tree if that column hasn't changed, but it just frees up your flows from running kind of a million times if you have a really popular list. So here's kind of the formula. Starts with an @ sign. Equals is just comparing two things. And it's just saying, hey, does the approval requested value equal yes? If so, go ahead and run the flow. If not, we're just not even going to bother running the flow. So you can add that if you want to, and then make sure you click done and save, and you're off to the races. Alrighty folks, that does it for this not so quick video on how to create a simple Teams approval workflow with the help of SharePoint and Power Automate. In my experience, the most challenging parts about this workflow are just getting familiar with how adaptive cards work. Thankfully, Microsoft Designer tool is great. I think it makes things pretty self-explanatory. It gives you a lot of flexibility. You can create some really cool cards with just a few different widgets. And the second part is accessing the data that comes back from the approval card. So like we had to do down here where we had to write a few of these by hand. I think that can be a little tricky, but again, just refer to a completed flow, look at how the data comes back, and then go from there. So go out, design some cards, have fun. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.